Welcome to the Living to 100 Club podcast. Here's our host, Dr. Joseph Cassiani.
Welcome, everyone, to the Living to 100 Club podcast, where we discuss strategies to live longer and stay positive about aging. We hear about programs and services and personal stories about successful aging and making it over the hurdles. Our goal is to create a mindset about living to 100 and turn aging on its head. Thanks for joining us today. I'm your host, Joe Cassiani. Today, our guest is returning for a follow-up conversation about physical fitness. Dan McFarlane was on our program just about a year ago, and he's here again to talk about the importance of physical exercise. But what type of exercise is the question of the day? Why are so many proposed solutions for exercising not working? And what should we be doing to stay at our peak physically? Mobility is what Dan recommends, and we'll hear much more about why he believes this. First, a little background. Dan McFarlane is a certified personal trainer and a physical therapist assistant who does house calls. He's performed over 15,000 in-home therapy sessions, primarily with senior citizens. As he says, 90% of my patients were prescribed physical therapy because of generalized age-related weakness. He realized that as a senior citizen, he could not let this happen to himself. After years of research and experimentation, Dan discovered the essential facts about physical fitness. These discoveries led him to create the Mobility Max 10-minute home exercise system. For the past 10 years, I exercise only 10 minutes a day. My fitness age is 20 to 30 years younger than my actual age. That's quite an accomplishment, Dan. Welcome to our program. Thank you for being with us today.
Well, you're welcome, Joe, and thank you for having me.
Great. I always like to begin by asking our guest to tell us a little bit about the journey that brought you to where you are today.
Sure. Well, I never envisioned a career in physical therapy. I was an insurance agent for most of my life, and then in my early 50s, I went back to school and became and graduated as a physical therapy assistant. Mm-hmm. And then in my mid-50s, I started my current practice of seeing physical therapy patients. And as you mentioned, I had the opportunity and chose to do physical therapy through the home health industry. So physical therapy can be delivered in a lot of different places. Typically, it'd be a hospital or an outpatient clinic where we go to get our physical therapy. In my case, I was making house calls. I was providing home health physical therapy. And Joe, this gives you the most real and personal appreciation and understanding for how the physical limitations that I am addressing through physical therapy, how those physical limitations are impacting on a day-to-day, real-life basis the quality of life of my patients.
Yeah.
And so observing this over a period of time, it became apparent that the vast majority of these elderly folks, maybe just one generation beyond me, now I was in my late 50s then, I'm in my early 70s now, mm-hmm. But they had received a prescription for physical therapy at home, most of them just because they had grown weak, not because they had a disease, they had cancer or a stroke or a heart attack or a hip or knee replacement. Yes, I did see all of those in the mix, but the vast majority of the prescriptions were written by doctors who saw their patient, whether it be Joe or Mary, come in on the walker and realized they were having trouble getting up and down from the chair, that they were not safe walking, their balance was bad. So there I was in the homes of these folks, and I just was able to take in the full spectrum of their lives by virtue of just talking to them, but also, of course, seeing the pictures on the walls and learning about their careers, and then to see what this golden age, the golden years of retirement was bringing to them, where they were very limited in their ability to move around. They were afraid, making the wrong step and perhaps falling. And it just seemed very, it was very sad to me. And then, of course, as a physical therapist, I was tasked with, trying to fix this. And, I must say, I had to reconcile the fact that, I'm going to do the best I can do in my 2 visits a week here for 45 minutes, and I'm going to offer suggestions and techniques. But, gosh, this is the result. And Martha, or whoever the patient is, this person has been trending in this direction for a lot of years, simply because they didn't see it coming, and they were lulled into a false sense of security, and so I recognize that this was a sad situation, one that I certainly didn't want to fall into, being in my late 50s or 60ish, and so I just made it a passion to really study and understand this process of aging and what was happening, because even though there's so much conversation about it, and I think a lot of us just think, we know everything we need to know about, aging and exercise. There's obviously a huge gulf in what we think we know and what we're actually able to apply, because the trends are getting worse. And so today I find myself 10 years approximately from the time when I conceived of a simple, powerful home exercise routine that focused on functional fitness as well as providing therapeutic value that is necessary to take care of our musculoskeletal system. So, and I benefited greatly with that system. I enjoy seeing other people benefit from it, and it's simple. But anyway, so that's where I'm at now, and I just finished my 10-minute routine a few minutes ago, and then went out for a brisk walk to complement it, because you're not going to get the cardiovascular benefit that we would like to have, the endurance, stamina side of it, in just 10 minutes. That's a great remedy for quite a few things. Mm-hmm. But Joe, thank you for asking that question. Yeah. I hope I.
No, it's a great story. It's a great story, Dan, because you were so close to the real world for your patients, and they may have had different medical conditions, but there was that one common underlying theme or condition, that generalized weakness that you saw, so that caused you to dig and really immerse yourself in a lot of the research and what do we know about fitness and what do we know about physical decline in our senior years. So I'm looking forward to hearing more about your exercise routine. It's so fascinating that there's so much information out there, and yet so many people are kind of at a standstill. And I wonder, when you and I have talked, you've talked about how our generation today, our people in our 60s, 70s, 80s, are really different from other generations. Even people that are middle-aged adults, we are different from previous generations. Why is there such a predominance of sedentary lifestyles? What's going on? Why do we?
Well, that is a great insight and observation. When we say our generation, I presume, you and I are about the same age. And I would say, so our generation, 10, 15, 20 years prior and, some 10 years later, we are the first generation that has inherited a lifestyle of leisure and inactivity. We're as our reward for being retired, and retirement terms or length of time people are retired is now much longer. People are retiring earlier. We have great medical care that keeps us living longer. And we're the first generation to experience this. My grandfather, born in 1898, he worked in the auto factories, and then he retired at 65, and then 2 years later he died of a heart attack. And, that's people didn't live a long time into those years when they were not working. And so ours is the first generation to experience this. And in addition, technology and science has made it easier and easier for us to avoid doing physical things. So here we are, folks, looking to embrace our hard-earned retirement. And to a lot of people, that means, gee, I'm just not going to do much of anything. Even though they might have plans to do this or that, it usually, a lot of times, it just turns into not doing much of anything. And we're comforted by our recliners and our air conditioners, and a lot of the drudgery is taken out of our lives. We have our televisions, we have our devices, we have so many things to distract us cerebrally, and very little to engage us physically. And again, this is a unique anthropological circumstance that is happening, and it's primarily in the first world. If you think of other second, third world situations, people aren't blessed with the technology and the comforts and conveniences and the cushy retirements. So you see a different looking kind of human being. And interestingly enough, they have different types of morbidities, and we seem to have our characteristic morbidities here that are definitely a product of this unique situation we're in. And one of my friends often reminds me of a rock and roll song from back in the day, but he talked, the term that he emphasizes is being comfortably numb. And and that's I think a state that many of us may be adapting, and humans are not designed for that. We are still primitive machines. We're a machine. Our human body, our metabolism, our physiology, our musculoskeletal system, all of it was designed over whatever, pick your philosophy or your theory on, human origins and evolution. But, the human body is a machine designed for a specific purpose. So what happens when we take a machine and we use it the wrong way, or we don't use it at all? And again, likening the human anatomy to a machine, that machine doesn't function very well for very long if we don't use it according to its design. Human beings were designed to move. That's a fact. And when we fail to move, we are setting in motion a series of circumstances that lead to the decline of the function of that machine. And so therefore we have arthritis, we have pain, and that ends up affecting the other aspect of being human, which is our spirit. So there's a lot involved there, my friend.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we talk about, you mentioned the term functional performance, the functional value of activity, and I know there's so many exercise types of equipment out there, and tell me what your thinking is about this law of specificity and why so many of these different types of equipment are not working, all these solutions are not really very effective. What's going on here?
Well, that's an insightful question, Joe, because, every day we turn on the television, we're being led to believe that a certain gadget or a certain way of exercising is going to be the panacea. And if you just look back over the history of all of these gadgets, you'll have to ask, well, my goodness, if it was a panacea and it was so easy to use and to benefit from, why aren't we all fit? Why hasn't it caught on? How about, let's just go back to Susan Summers and the Thigh Master.
Sure.
So let's just talk about that for a moment. So much of what we are embracing and led to focus on with respect to fitness is simply slick marketing designed to extract money from us and leaves us feeling more like a failure every time. Every time we buy that product and we bring it home and we try it once and then we, follow instructions, well, you're not using it, put it under your bed. And then there it goes and you never see it again. Every time we do that, we, of course, are less inclined to go back and try exercise again. So it's a very diabolical thing, but, that's the way marketing is, buyer beware. But back to the idea of specificity. So when we exercise, it's important to think about the rule of specificity, or another way of putting it is you get exactly what you do. So, pay attention to, if you're going to adopt some exercise, you're going to do some exercise, pay attention to exactly what it is you're asking your body to do, and then ask yourself, okay, what is the value of this? So Suzanne Summers with her Thigh Master, okay, that accomplished one thing. If it did accomplish anything, it was to strengthen the adductors on the thighs, on the legs, the inner thighs, to strengthen those. But that's just an incredibly limited benefit. Let's talk about a different kind of exercise. Let's talk about push-ups. Okay, let's say a person does push-ups. What is the benefit of a push-up? What are we going to get? We know what we're going to get. We're going to get shoulder and arm strength, as well as chest and back are involved. And then as we move down the torso, you're also going to have some abdominal contractions, your core, because it has to stabilize yourself in that horizontal plane. So then we go down and we come back up, we go down and we come back up. So a push-up involves all of that. But, what are we getting from it in a functional sense? Well, it actually is a function. Well, first of all, we're getting a lot of muscles working synergistically. So unlike the Suzanne Summers device, which is just focusing in one very narrow area, a push-up is giving us, pretty much half of our body being worked. But it's a functional exercise, pushing away, slowly lowering ourselves and also pushing away. And if you ever find yourself on the floor, you'll notice that you need arm strength. You need to lean on an arm, and then you need to kind of maybe get on all fours and push away. So the law of specificity and the idea that you get exactly what you're doing is something we should be contemplating when we take on exercise. Another way to think about it, when you go into a gym and you do the Nautilus equipment, I see a lot of people doing that when I was doing some personal training at the Y. A lot of elderly folks come in and go through the circuit training. And I just have to wonder, how is that, all that circuit training really helping them with their functional activities. Because in essence, what they're becoming good at is manipulating those complicated machines. Okay, that's exactly what they're mastering when you do the Nautilus routine or the Cybex machine. Now you hope that a benefit redounds from that you find showing up in your life somewhere. Gee, can I play better tennis, or can I, go for a longer hike? That's questionable, whether, working those machines. Those machines, again, isolate on very narrow ranges of muscle and joints. And so they can be helpful, but just be aware they're really not a panacea. It's more the bodybuilder approach to exercise that has some value. But I'll just leave it at that, Joe. Have people think more analytically about what they decide to do. Ask themselves, okay, what difference is this going to make in my life? What do I want from fitness? What would that mean? Okay.
Yeah. No, I get your point. I mean, we have to ask, if we're trying to lift these massive truck tires or tractor tires and turn them over, I mean, that's good in some ways, but we really don't need to do that a whole lot of time outside.
It's true. It's funny you mention that, because that's one of the more popular imageries that we see from, the younger, show-offs, type is, flipping the truck tire or wagging the big heavy rope. These people have a lot of energy to burn off. Is what they're already fit. They're young, so just don't hurt themselves is what they need to do.
But I guess when you can combine a number of these different types of exercise routines, then you are really increasing your strength and your core and your balance and all of that. But you've talked a lot about, whether muscles are the primary concern or mobility. And I know you focus a lot on the mobility and the joints and making sure our joints are limber and loose. Tell us about that. What's your thinking here?
Well, that's one of my favorite things to contemplate and to study. And one of the things that I discovered right away was that when we exercise, all of our exercise icons and models, for the most part, are showing us really glamorous muscles. And if we're senior citizens, if we're 45, 50, 60 and over, or we're not athletes and we're not used to exercising, then that's probably not a realistic role model for us. But in the pursuit of muscle tone and definition and, that iconic image that lures us in and then disappoints us, what is lost in the spectrum of exercise is the importance of the joint. And I would just have people, encourage people to think a little bit about what are we exercising? Our body is, made up of bones, joints, and muscles. And muscles get all the attention, but joints are the linchpin. Joints are the place where if we injure a joint trying to get those big muscles, oh boy, now we're going to have some real downtime, because joints do not have a robust healing capacity. Muscles, on the other hand, if you tear a muscle, if you strain a muscle, they're infused with blood. They have the capacity to heal over time, even ligaments and tendons, soft tissue like that. But in the course of trying to get those glamour muscles, or to just get stronger for the sake of getting stronger, if we injure a joint, we are really in trouble for a long time. Joints don't have a robust healing capacity. In fact, there is a healing capacity, but it takes a certain technique to help the daily healing and repair of just the micro traumas. The little tiny tears that we're doing inside our joints need to be addressed every day, let alone the traumatic things that happen when we try to lift weights or do, kind of macho things for the muscles. So I want folks to think about their joints in the process of designing a daily exercise routine for themselves. Yoga is a great way to exercise holistically and to respect the needs of the joints. So what the joints need, and this is the healing capacity that can be employed by each of us for our joints, our shoulders, our hips, our knees, our spine. What joints need is to go through the full range of motion, just like a gate or being open, the full distance that the hinge allows. Every day, that joint needs to go through that full range of motion. So just think of a big stretch. You take your arms up over your head, you straighten your elbows, you kind of reach back, and you go to that comfortable but tight spot where you can't go any further, and that's the end of the range of motion. And then by holding for 30 seconds, this is the other part of the technique. You hold for 30 seconds. That allows the nourishing flow of the lubrication inside the joint capsule to bathe the cartilage and help to relieve and get rid of some of the little micro traumas that have occurred. So go to the end of the range of motion with each joint. You stretch. You can call it a stretch, but you don't have to force it. And you hold that for 30 seconds while the synovial fluid gets to those spaces inside the joint capsule that it doesn't get to serve. And this is the only healing capacity we have for our joints. So that's a key element that's forgotten, and you don't see that. The only time you see joints talked about is on hip replacements or knee, replacements and pain and braces and salves and ointments and everything else. But we don't hear our exercise icons and exercise devices addressing the health of joints. It's strictly the muscles. Just go for the muscle. Well, goodness sakes, folks, you can have the strongest muscle in the world, but if you injure that joint, pretty soon that muscle is going to be nothing but flab, and it's a bad scenario. So.
Yeah. So it's the joints then that are really not only central, but when the joints don't work, that's when we get tight. That's when we lose our flexibility. That's when we don't have obviously the range of movement, but we don't have the agility that we really need just to go day to day. I mean, it's really the joints that tie us up, so to speak. It's not the bones. I mean, the bones might be weak or might fracture. The muscles might tear, but the muscles can heal. So it's really the joints that is really the name of the game here.
Yes. Even the bones have a great healing capacity. There's blood inside bones, and if you break a bone, it's going to repair. But when you damage the interior spaces of your joints, that being the cartilage primarily, that slippery, smooth surface that becomes, that's where arthritis comes from, is the corroding away of that slippery, smooth surface that allows the two bones to move across to each other, friction-free. So the cartilage is vital to that, but the synovial fluid, and very few people know about this wonderful specialized substance that is inside our joint capsule. It's synovial fluid, and synovium comes from the Greek or Latin, meaning egg white. So imagine, the slippery, viscous qualities of egg white, and that's inside the joint. And that helps to keep that cartilage healthy. So you just want to bathe that cartilage every day in as much of that synovial fluid by stretching to the end of the range of motion and holding for 30 seconds. Yes, and keep the joints healthy. And certainly as for senior citizens, all of our exercise routines should be joint-centric and with a high level of awareness of the needs of our joints, because that is going to be the thing that will trip us up faster than anything and put us down is injuring a joint.
Yeah. Well, that's valuable information. That's really good information, Dan. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
I'm glad we could spend some time on this. So let's talk about your system, because I know you've immersed yourself in a lot of this research and you've looked at a lot of different studies, and you did create your Mobility Max 10-minute home exercise system. Tell our listeners what's involved in this 10-minute exercise. Well,
a little bit about the journey that I traveled as I was creating this. So when I was in the homes of these elderly folks, I was taught, as a physical therapist, you cannot take equipment in there. Just be creative. Take your patient over to the sink, where they can hold on to the sink, and then they can do some basic leg exercises, up and down on the toes, putting a leg out to the side, mini squats, and these kind of things. At the same time, I had an elderly friend who was just an amazing fitness guy, 20 years older than me, and he was just amazing with his fitness. And he showed me one day what he was doing, and it was all just simple body weight exercises, just body against gravity, the push-ups, the air squats, these kinds of things. And he was amazing. So for myself, I started to think in more basic terms about going forward with my own exercise routine. I was just simply trying to find something for myself. At the same time, I came across a book that I highly recommend for everyone. It's written by a physical therapist named Dr. Weisberg. It's called 3 Minutes to a Pain-Free Life. And in that book, Dr. Weisberg puts forth many of the principles that I'm talking about today, in particular the care and keeping of your joints. But he also set forth a 3-minute routine for taking care of your joints and your muscles. And so I envisioned at some point, well, gee, I need what if I had a bar that was like the rungs of a ladder that could be set into a open door frame, and the single bar could be put at any position of the 14 levels up and down the door frame, where it created a stable, sturdy place to hold on to, everywhere from 2 to 3 inches off the floor to, every 6 inches up that door frame. And then I thought about Dr. Weisberg's 6 exercises. I incorporated those into the routine. But then I began to think deeply about, what at some point, and I may have the chronological out of whack here a little bit, but I began to think, what is physical fitness? What I really, so I went looking for a definition. And the first thing I found was that there is no universal definition of physical fitness. And so I realized, well, that's a trap. Gosh, we can end up, being led to believe anything is physical fitness. So I drilled down a little farther, and I determined that what the type of physical fitness I wanted would be based on mobility. And so I researched that and realized I was on to something that's kind of popular in exercise the world. It's called functional fitness. But, I was using the term mobility. And so I then, having decided that mobility was going to be the definition of physical fitness for me, that the more I could maintain my mobility, the higher I could evolve my mobility, which is simply a kind of a technical way of saying movement, that I would gain the traditional values that we want in fitness, which is strength and balance and flexibility. So I went looking again a little further. I said, well, where does our mobility come from? And that's when I really had a eureka moment there. That led me to the concept of human development as infants, and how we initially go from little blobs that can barely do anything after we're born to just in a couple years we are just little, we're climbing on everything, we're little athletes. So what happens in that space of time? Well, Joe, it turns out that there's a very predictable set of exercises that infants do and toddlers do in order to gain their mobility. We all do it. Maybe a little different for each of us, a little longer time, but it's a sequence of starting on your back and then being on your belly and then propping up, lifting the head up. Each one of those steps in what we call the baby milestones is a point at which we are developing organic strength and flexibility that lead us to the goal of being great mobile little machines, standing, running, jumping. And it occurred to me that what I was looking at was the hierarchy, the sequence of exercises that was necessary to do, not optional, was necessary to do in order to be a good, to have mobility, to stand, to be balanced, to maneuver. And so I studied what's called gross motor developmental stages of infants and toddlers, and I kept seeing the same sequence of exercises, and I incorporated those into the 10-minute routine along with Dr. Weisberg's 6 exercises. And then having the bar apparatus, which I could now place at higher levels, I was able to add some other classic body weight exercises. So what the Mobility Max 10-minute home exercise routine is a series of 20 functional and therapeutic exercises. So they're functional, they strengthen us and prepare us to be mobile. And they're therapeutic, they provide therapeutic value in that they include end-of-range motion for all of our joints, going through the full range of motion and holding for 30 seconds to get the synovial fluid. So and then I just condense it down to a 20 exercise, 30 seconds each, 10-minute routine where you start on your belly with the bar. You're in every position, you're exercising every muscle, you're moving the bar every couple exercises up the door frame, up the ladder, so to speak, and till you're, on your knees at some point, put a pillow or something under if you're having trouble being on your knees. But there's such great value in being on our knees. And then on all fours, in a squat, single leg stance, just the full array of fundamental mobility movements that we need to make, along with the therapeutic value of getting that synovial fluid in the joints. And my friend, it's just amazing what that has done for me and my family and friends and others that have, that are using the system. My wife used to be a hairstylist, and she'd come home after 8 hours and just complaining and whining. Oh, it feels. Why do I hurt? I said, well, you'd been in one position doing repetitive motion all day. I said, just go do the routine. And okay. And she'd come back and said, oh my God, I feel so much better. Why do I said, well, you just engaged all of your muscles. You got every one of your muscles just woke up a little bit. Plus you went through full range of motion for all your joints. Your body's rebalanced. So what the Mobility Max 10-minute home exercise system is a very simple apparatus that has zero footprint in your home, unlike all the other big things we're going to drag home. But zero footprint. It's so organic and holistic, and you're just going, and I have a training manual that goes with it. And by the way, I'd like to make an offer to anyone that's listening, anyone that contacts me. I'll be happy to send them a free copy of the training manual. It'll be a digital copy, but we can talk about that later. But it shows how to go through the routine step by step, and then as you learn it, you become quicker at it. It's going to be hard to do it in 10 minutes at first, but, then you learn it. And you just do it, and when you see it every day there in your doorway, and it's only going to take 10 minutes, well, by gosh, there's more likely to get done.
I think, Dan, this is the best explanation of exercise and fitness that I've heard. And, we're all aging. We're all going through the same process, and to be able to take in this kind of information and implement it in our day-to-day routines, I think that's great. I think that's great. And I can say to my listeners that I've tried this Mobility Max for a few days. I had a chance to borrow it, and I agree. I think it's a good piece of equipment, and it's available. So you have a website, Dan, and I appreciate your offering the copy of your booklet, your manual to anybody who requires. How can they contact you if they're interested?
Well, they can contact me on there'll be a couple ways. One is the .com, which is mobilitymax10, numeral 10.com. I'm also on Facebook as Mobility Max LLC, and I can be contacted there. And then I'm also going to just read out my cell phone number for anyone that is hearing this and would like to talk to me about it personally at any time. I would encourage you to just text me or call me, because I'd love to talk to you and find out what you're dealing with and what your goals are as far as fitness, and help you get a better understanding of how you can really get on top of this situation. So my phone number is 813-919-3618.
813-919-3618. And the Facebook group is Mobility Max LLC. And the website is mobilitymax1010.com.
Yes, sir.
Great. Well, and I'm really glad to have done this follow-up with you. I know last year we talked about it. We didn't get in at this level last time, so I'm glad we had a chance to have you back.
Thank you.
Yeah. We are out of time, though, but before we wrap up, I just want to remind our listeners about a few items. I'm pleased to announce a co-sponsor for our podcast, A Mighty Good Time. Are you looking for ways to engage and stay active? Check out amightygoodtime.com. It's a one-stop shop for events and activities for those 50 and over. Free to search, and it's free to post. amightygoodtime.com. Also, there's a new offering on my website where individuals can arrange one-on-one coaching calls with Dr. Joe, that's me, to discuss bouncing back from setbacks. How can we tap into our resilient self? How can we find ways to make it over those obstacles we face on our different journeys? Take a look at the Work with Dr. Joe tab on the website, livingto100.club. And be sure to subscribe to our email list to receive our newsletter and other announcements. And finally, pick up a copy of my book on Amazon, Living Longer is the New Normal. I think that whatever age you're at, inspiration and a positive mindset can be put to good use. That's my message in the book. So, Dan, thank you so much again for being a part of this program. I think it was immensely helpful to our listeners, and I commend you for all the good work you've done.
Well, thank you, Joe, and I certainly commend you. I know you're doing everything you can, and I've met you personally and your lovely wife, and you certainly look terrific, both of you, and you're enjoying a good life based on the things that you are teaching us. So thank you.
Yeah, well, you're most welcome. And it's only 10 minutes a day. That's the best part.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. True. Okay. Well, again, thanks, and thanks to everyone for listening to this episode. Hope to see you next time.
Let's feel the bass coming in. everyone, this is Meredith from the Senior Fitness with Meredith podcast, where I discuss all things for seniors. From fitness, your health and wellness journeys, how to be all over strong and beyond. I also have my mini podcast called Motivation with Meredith. It's a great, quick motivational pick-me-up for your days. Join me, listen now, search for Senior Fitness with Meredith on your favorite podcast platform.